The airport terminal was packed, the air thick with the scent of coffee and the distant hum of conversations blending into an indistinct murmur. Tourists bustled about, some eager to start their vacations, others exhausted from long flights. Among them, a young, slim-built man walked with casual ease, a gray hoodie pulled over his head, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He looked like any other tourist, calm, quiet, and unassuming. But that was their first mistake. A group of 3 Jamaican thugs had been watching him from the moment he stepped off the plane. They saw a young American, alone, carrying a nice bag, wearing expensive sneakers. Easy pickings. They had no idea who they were messing with. The moment he turned a corner into a quieter hallway leading to the baggage claim, they made their move. One of them, a thick-shouldered man with gold teeth, stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Why you dead do, boss? You look lost. You need help with that bag?" His tone was smooth, but his eyes were sharp, predatory. The young tourist paused, glancing up from under his hoodie. His face remained unreadable, but something in his icy blue eyes sent a shiver down the thug's spine. Before he could respond, another thug, a wiry man with dreadlocks, moved behind him, subtly cutting off his exit. The third man, the tallest of the group, leaned in closer, his voice lowering. "Me SH, this na seem like a place fi be alone, me youth. You understand?" The young tourist sighed, tilting his head slightly. He wasn't scared. In fact, his body was completely relaxed, almost too relaxed for someone being cornered. "Look, fellas, I don't want any trouble," he said, his voice calm. The gold-toothed thug smirked. "Oh, but me think you already in a trouble, boss." And then, he reached for the tourist's bag. Big mistake. In an explosive blur of movement, the young man's hand shot out like lightning, grabbing the thug's wrist in a grip so tight bones popped. "Agh!" The thug screamed, his knees buckling. Before his friends could react, the tourist twisted his arm at an unnatural angle, forcing him down. The second thug lunged forward, but the tourist ducked, his fist slamming into the man's ribs so hard a sickening crunch echoed in the hallway. The thug stumbled back, gasping for air. The third thug, the tallest one, froze in place, his mind racing. What just happened? The tourist looked up, finally pulling back his hoodie, revealing a square-jawed face with sharp, focused eyes. "I try to be nice," he said, his voice low and steady. "But you messed with the wrong guy." He let go of the first thug's wrist, and the man collapsed onto the floor, cradling his arm in agony. The tallest thug reached into his waistband, fumbling for something. A knife? A gun? But it was too late. The tourist lunged forward, grabbing him by the shirt, and in one swift motion, he slammed him against the wall. His voice dropped into a deadly whisper. "Let me give you some advice," he said. "Never pick on someone when you don't know who you're dealing with." The thug stared, his body frozen in shock. Then, a loud shout from the distance. Security guards rushed towards them, their radios crackling. The tourist let go of the thug, stepping back just as the men in uniform arrived. The guards took one look at the scene, one thug on the ground groaning in pain, another barely standing, and the third still pressed against the wall. One of the officers stepped forward. "What's going on here?" The tourist adjusted his hoodie, taking a deep breath. "Just a misunderstanding," he said coolly. But in that moment, one of the security guards looked at him closely. His eyes widened slightly. He recognized the young man, and that's when everything changed. The security guard's face stiffened as recognition flashed in his eyes. He had seen that face before, not on a tourist brochure, not on TV, but in classified reports and military briefings. He didn't just know who this young man was. He knew what he was capable of. The guard took a slow step forward, eyeing the crumpled thugs on the floor. "Sir, do you have identification?" His voice was cautious, almost respectful. The young tourist, who was no ordinary tourist, sighed, reached into his jacket pocket, and pulled out a small, black card. He flipped it open, revealing a military ID with an emblem that sent chills down the guard's spine. "United States Navy SEAL," the guard murmured under his breath, reading it twice just to be sure. The thugs had no idea what those words meant, but the guard did. He had just stopped a highly trained, deadly operative from tearing these fools apart. The thugs, still groaning on the ground, started realizing something was off. The man they thought was just some helpless tourist wasn't scared. He wasn't even rattled. And now, the guards weren't treating him like a suspect, but with respect. The tall thug, still pressed against the wall, finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Yow, you's a soldier or something?" The Navy SEAL glanced at him, his face unreadable. "Something like that." The gold-toothed thug, still clutching his wrist, stared in shock. His voice was shaky. "I mean, even though, boss." The Navy SEAL let out a slow breath. You never know who you're messing with until it's too late. The security guards turned their attention to the thugs. "You three, on the ground, hands behind your backs," one of them barked, his hand resting on his holster. The thugs froze. "Wah, me never do nothin'," the gold-toothed thug protested. "Oh, so now you're innocent," the SEAL said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's funny because a minute ago, you were about to rob me." The security team wasted no time. One by one, the thugs were searched and restrained. The wiry one had a switchblade in his pocket, and the tall one had a pocket full of stolen wallets. "This isn't their first time," one of the officers muttered. "We've had complaints about these guys harassing tourists before." The gold-toothed thug tried to protest, but the SEAL simply stared him down. And that's when something unexpected happened. A commotion erupted behind them. A group of people had gathered, watching everything unfold. Some had been recording, others were whispering to each other. And then, a man in a suit pushed through the crowd. "Let them go," he demanded, his voice sharp. The guards turned, confused. The man, tall, well-dressed, and with an authoritative air, looked furious. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his eyes scanning the scene before landing on the thugs. The gold-toothed thug grinned through the pain, suddenly emboldened. "Big man, tell dem file we GUH. Dem na ha no proof." The man in the suit turned to the guards. "These are my people," he said firmly. "I don't know what this American is claiming, but I can assure you, these young men wouldn't do anything wrong." The Navy SEAL narrowed his eyes. Something was off. The security guards glanced at each other, unsure. This man was clearly someone important. The well-dressed man glared at the SEAL. "I don't know who you are, but I suggest you walk away. Now." The tension in the air shifted. The thug smirked, realizing this man had power. But the SEAL? He wasn't intimidated, not even a little. He slowly tilted his head, studying the man in the suit. And then he said something that made the entire crowd go silent. "And who exactly are you?" The man froze, his jaw tightening. And in that moment, the SEAL knew he was hiding something. Something big, something dangerous. But before he could say another word, a loud scream pierced the air. Everyone's head snapped toward the baggage claim. A woman was crying, shouting something in frantic, broken English. The crowd parted, revealing a young American couple near the luggage conveyor belt. And then the Navy SEAL saw it. A man was running. A small child was in his arms. And just like that, the game changed. The Navy SEAL's body snapped into action before his mind could even process it. The kidnapper was already halfway to the exit, his feet pounding against the polished airport floor. The little girl in his arms, a blonde-haired child no older than 5, was kicking, screaming, thrashing. The mother's shrieks cut through the terminal. "My daughter! Stop him! Please, someone!" The well-dressed man, the one who had tried to defend the thugs, visibly tensed. His eyes flickered toward the kidnapper, a silent recognition. The Navy SEAL caught it. "You know him?" His voice was quiet, deadly. The man's mouth twitched, his hands clenching into fists. He didn't respond, but that was all the confirmation the SEAL needed. He was done asking questions. His feet moved before anyone else could react. Full sprint. The kidnapper was fast, but the SEAL was faster. People screamed and dodged out of the way as the chase tore through the terminal. The kidnapper shoved past an elderly man, knocking his suitcase over. A security officer tried to intervene, but the SEAL was already there. 20 feet away. 15. 10. The kidnapper turned his head, eyes wide with panic. He had expected security. He had expected slow, overweight officers. He hadn't expected a predator. He made a sharp turn, trying to slip between a row of chairs. Bad move. The SEAL launched himself forward, leaping over a suitcase, closing the distance in an instant. He didn't hesitate. His hand shot out, grabbing the back of the kidnapper's shirt. Yank! The man let out a strangled grunt as he was ripped backward with brutal force. His feet left the ground, his body twisting in midair. He hit the floor hard, skull cracking against the tile. The little girl rolled away, sobbing. The SEAL's instincts kicked in. He dropped to a knee, scooping her up in one arm. "I've got you," he whispered, his voice calm. "You're safe now." The child buried her face in his shoulder, trembling. The kidnapper groaned, trying to push himself up. The SEAL was on him in an instant. A boot pressed against the man's chest, pinning him to the ground. "Who sent you?" the SEAL demanded. The man gritted his teeth, refusing to speak. The SEAL's eyes snapped up, back toward the well-dressed man. He was gone, vanished into the crowd. The SEAL cursed under his breath. Security finally caught up, surrounding them. One of the guards rushed to take the child, but the SEAL hesitated. The little girl's tiny fingers clung to his jacket, her face pressed against him. She was terrified. He softened his voice. "It's okay. I'm not leaving. You're safe now." Slowly, she loosened her grip. The SEAL carefully handed her over to the officer, who immediately wrapped her in a blanket. The mother sprinted toward them, collapsing into sobs as she took her daughter into her arms. "Oh my God! Thank you. Thank you," she sobbed. The SEAL nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. This wasn't random. It wasn't just a robbery. The thugs, the well-dressed man, the kidnapper, it was all connected. And the man in the suit? He had vanished way too quickly. The SEAL exhaled, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't over. Not even close. The terminal was still in chaos. Security guards barking orders. Airport staff trying to restore order. The mother sobbing as she held her daughter close. But the Navy SEAL? His mind was locked onto one thing. The man in the suit. He was gone. No one disappears that fast. The SEAL's instincts, honed by years of combat, training, and survival, were screaming at him. This wasn't some random kidnapping attempt. It was something bigger. His eyes swept the terminal. Where would he run? Then he saw it. A flash of movement near the VIP exit. A black luxury sedan idled just outside the glass doors, its taillights glowing ominously. And just before the tinted door swung shut, the SEAL caught a glimpse of the man in the suit sliding into the back seat. "There you are." He moved. Fast. "Hey!" A security guard tried to grab his arm, but the SEAL twisted out of reach, sprinting toward the doors. The car's tires screeched against the pavement as it lurched forward, trying to speed away. Too late. The SEAL was already outside. In one smooth motion, he grabbed a metal luggage cart and swung it with full force. Crash! The cart slammed into the side of the speeding car, shattering the rear passenger window. The car swerved wildly, tires screeching. The SEAL didn't hesitate. He ran straight for it, lunging at the door handle. But the driver floored it. The car roared forward, disappearing into the night. The SEAL stood there, breathing hard. So close. He glanced down. Shards of glass littered the ground. And then he saw something small, something important. A silver cufflink stamped with an intricate logo. He knelt, picking it up, turning it over in his fingers. His stomach tightened. He knew this symbol. It wasn't just any organization. It was a mark of the syndicate, a ruthless, underground network that specialized in smuggling, human trafficking, and high-level corruption. The SEAL's jaw clenched. This wasn't just a street crime. This was a war, and he had just stepped into the middle of it. The cold metal of the cufflink pressed against the Navy SEAL's palm as he studied the emblem. His mind was already working, connecting the dots, piecing together what just happened. The Jamaican thugs at the airport. The man in the suit protecting them. The child kidnapping. Now this symbol. The syndicate. The last time he had seen this mark, he was deep in enemy territory on a classified mission overseas. That mission had ended with bullet wounds, burned documents, and bodies buried in the sand. But now, the syndicate was here, on civilian soil, in broad daylight. And worse, they were organized. He slid the cufflink into his pocket, his mind racing. There had to be more clues. Then a voice behind him. "Sir, I need you to come with us." The SEAL turned to see two uniformed officers, their hands resting near their holsters. Airport security. He knew how this looked. A man throwing luggage carts at luxury cars, knocking out thugs in the middle of a terminal, and nearly breaking a man's arm. Most people would be nervous. The SEAL? He was annoyed. "Unless you're arresting me, I have places to be," he said, his voice calm but firm. One of the officers hesitated. They had seen what happened. They weren't sure if this guy was a threat or a hero. But before they could answer, a familiar voice rang out. "Let him go. He's with me." The SEAL turned, surprised. Walking toward him was a woman in a sharp navy blue suit, her brown hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. She had an FBI badge clipped to her belt. She stopped a few feet away, crossing her arms. Her green eyes were locked onto his. "Been a long time, Lieutenant Blake?" The SEAL's lips twitched slightly. "Didn't expect to see you here, Agent Carter." The security guards looked at each other, confused. The woman, FBI Special Agent Natalie Carter, turned to them. "He's not the one you should be worried about. You have 3 suspects inside that need processing and a kidnapping attempt that needs full review. Get your priorities straight." The guards hesitated, then nodded. They had bigger problems to deal with. As they left, Agent Carter turned back to the SEAL. "What the hell have you gotten yourself into this time?" Blake exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Something big. The syndicate is involved." Her expression darkened. "You sure?" Blake pulled the cufflink from his pocket, flipping it between his fingers. Carter stared at it, then cursed under her breath. "Damn it." Blake watched her reaction closely. "You know something?" She hesitated, then glanced around. "Not here. Come with me." She turned, walking toward a black SUV parked near the curb. Blake followed, his mind racing. Whatever this was, it was bigger than a robbery, bigger than a kidnapping. And if the FBI was involved, things were about to get a whole lot worse. The black SUV weaved through Kingston's crowded streets, the scent of the ocean faint in the humid air. Inside, Agent Natalie Carter kept her hands firm on the wheel, her jaw tight. Blake sat in the passenger seat, his mind still racing. The syndicate, a kidnapping at an international airport. And now, the FBI was already on the case. Something wasn't adding up. Blake broke the silence first. "How long have you been tracking them?" Carter didn't answer at first. Her fingers gripped the wheel a little tighter. Then a sigh. 18 months. Blake raised an eyebrow. "And?" She exhaled sharply. "And it's bad. Real bad. The syndicate's operations here have expanded fast. Drug smuggling, money laundering, human trafficking." Blake's stomach tightened. Carter glanced at him. The little girl at the airport? She wasn't a random target. She was pre-selected. Blake's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Carter took a deep breath. "We believe the syndicate has been targeting American tourists, families, specifically, kidnapping their children and selling them into high-end trafficking rings." Blake felt his pulse hammer. He had seen a lot of evil in his time, but this was beyond vile. He clenched his fists. And the man in the suit? Carter's jaw tightened. "That's the part that keeps me up at night." She reached into the center console, pulling out a tablet. She tapped the screen, and a grainy security image appeared. A man in a tailored suit, stepping out of a luxury car. The same man from the airport. Blake leaned in. "Who is he?" Carter's voice was grim. "Malcolm Graves. Jamaican businessman, real estate mogul, politician, and, we believe, a high-ranking syndicate handler." Blake's blood ran cold. Carter continued. "We've suspected Graves for years, but he's untouchable. He owns judges, police, even some government officials. That's why, when I saw you going after his car today..." She trailed off, shaking her head. Blake smirked. "You were worried I'd ruin your investigation?" Carter shot him a look. "I was worried you'd get yourself killed. Graves is dangerous, Blake. You may be a SEAL, but he doesn't play fair. He doesn't fight in the open. He strikes from the shadows. If you go after him alone, you'll disappear like the others." Blake tilted his head slightly. "Others?" Carter's voice dropped. "For people have tried to expose him in the last 2 years. Journalists, activists, even a former cop. They all vanished." Blake sat back, exhaling. Graves wasn't just some corrupt businessman. He was a predator, a ghost. And now, Blake was on his radar. Carter's voice softened. Look, I know that face, Blake. I know you're already thinking of ways to go after him. But listen to me, if you want to take him down, we do it my way. Carefully. Legally. Blake chuckled without humor. Carefully? Legally? You know that's not how I operate. Carter sighed. Yeah, and that's what worries me. The SUV pulled into an underground parking garage. Carter killed the engine and turned to face him. If we're doing this, we do it smart. We gather intel. We find Graves' weak spots. And when the time is right, she looked him dead in the eye. We burn him to the ground. Blake grinned. Now you're speaking my language. But just as Carter opened her door, a gunshot rang out. The side mirror exploded in a spray of glass. Carter ducked. Blake was already moving. More shots. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off the concrete pillars. Carter reached for her gun. Blake snapped into action, yanking her down behind the dashboard. Sniper. His voice was low, controlled. Second floor, northwest corner. Carter cursed under her breath. They knew we were coming. Blake's eyes locked onto the shadowy figure above. And just like that, this mission became personal. The sniper reloaded, the metallic click echoing through the underground parking garage. Blake didn't wait. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Carter's wrist and yanked her behind a parked SUV. Another shot rang out, the bullet shattering the windshield where she had just been. Carter gritted her teeth. How the hell did they find us so fast? Blake wasn't listening. His mind was already calculating distance, angles, cover. Second floor, northwest corner. The sniper wasn't alone. A second shadow moved along the upper level. Another gunman. This wasn't just a hit. This was a coordinated ambush. Blake glanced at Carter. You armed? Carter huffed. Of course. She pulled a Glock 19 from her holster. Blake smirked. Good? Cover me? Before she could protest, he moved. Fast. Low and quick, weaving between parked cars. The next bullet missed him by inches, shattering a side mirror. Blake rolled behind a concrete pillar, then popped up, one precise shot. Bang! The first gunman collapsed, a scream cut short. The sniper on the second floor cursed, repositioning. Carter took advantage of the distraction. She rose from behind cover, firing 3 rapid shots. The sniper ducked, but it was too late. Blake was already on the move. He grabbed the edge of a parked sedan, using the momentum to swing himself up onto the hood, then the roof. With one powerful leap, he caught the edge of the balcony above, muscling himself up. The sniper spun around, rifle raised. Too slow. Blake drove his fist into the man's face. A sickening crunch as the sniper crumpled against the railing. Carter rushed up the stairs, gun still raised. Clear? Blake checked the fallen sniper's pulse. Nothing. He grabbed the man's rifle, ejecting the magazine. Clear? Carter exhaled, lowering her gun. This was no random hit. This was Graves. Blake nodded, his jaw tight. Yeah, and now he knows we're coming. She sighed. We need a plan. Blake turned, looking out over the dark city beyond the garage. A plan? No. He needed to finish this. For the kidnapped kids. For the families destroyed. For all the people Graves had silenced. Blake's eyes burned with determination. No more waiting. We take the fight to him. Carter glanced at him, then at the bodies on the ground. She knew that look in his eye. And she knew. There was no stopping him now. The roar of the ocean echoed in the distance as Blake adjusted his gear. He stood at the edge of a high-rise rooftop in Kingston, his eyes locked on the mansion below. Malcolm Graves' estate. A fortress on the cliffs, high walls, armed guards, motion sensors, and an underground tunnel rumored to lead straight to the docks. The syndicate's stronghold. Carter stood beside him, her expression unreadable. You sure about this? Blake tightened the strap on his vest. No more waiting. Carter sighed. All right, but if we do this, we do it smart. I called in backup, local forces, my FBI team. They'll be moving in from the west side of the estate in 20 minutes. Blake cracked his knuckles. I won't need 20 minutes. Carter exhaled. I was afraid you'd say that. Blake checked his watch. Then, without another word, he jumped. A full sprint. A leap from the rooftop. His boots slammed onto the balcony of the neighboring building. Carter muttered a curse as she followed, much less gracefully. Inside the mansion, Graves was waiting. He sat in his lavish office, swirling a glass of expensive rum, his expression cold. The TV screens in front of him displayed security footage from all around the estate. His personal bodyguard, a towering enforcer known as Bishop, stood nearby. Graves took a slow sip of his drink. "They're here." Bishop cracked his knuckles. "Want me to handle it?" Graves smiled slightly. "Let the men soften them up first. If our guest makes it past them, then you can have your fun." Bishop grinned. "Understood." Outside, Blake moved like a ghost. Two guards patrolling near the garden never saw him coming. One moment, they were standing scanning the perimeter. The next, a blur of motion, a flash of steel, a silenced takedown. Two bodies collapsed into the bushes. Blake pressed forward, slipping past cameras, avoiding tripwires. Then, an alarm blared. Damn! Graves had set a trap. Floodlights snapped on, illuminating the mansion grounds like daylight. Shadows moved everywhere. Guards swarmed the courtyard, rifles raised. Carter's voice crackled in his earpiece. "They know we're here. I'm pinned down on the west side." Blake cursed under his breath. Then, he did what he did best. He attacked. Bang! Bang! The first two guards dropped before they could even aim. Blake moved fast, zigzagging, using cover, dodging gunfire. A guard swung at him with a baton. Blake caught his wrist, twisting it violently. A sickening snap. The man screamed as Blake dropped him. The next guard charged with a knife. Blake sidestepped, elbowing him across the jaw, sending him crumpling to the ground. One by one, they fell. Then, a slow clap from the mansion steps. Blake looked up. Standing there, calm, composed, and completely unbothered, was Malcolm Graves. Behind him, Bishop, the human wrecking ball, cracked his knuckles, grinning. Graves smirked. "You're impressive, I'll give you that. But you made one mistake, soldier." Blake's fingers tightened around his weapon. Graves took a slow step forward. "You came here alone." Blake exhaled sharply. "Who said I was alone?" At that exact moment, the entire west side of the mansion exploded. The shockwave from the explosion sent guards flying off their feet as flames erupted from the west wing of the mansion. Carter's voice crackled in Blake's earpiece. "Surprise. Told you I called backup." Graves' smirk disappeared. His men were panicking. Blake took his chance. Gunfire erupted. Blake surged forward, dodging a wild punch from Bishop. The man was strong, insanely strong, but Blake was faster. Crack! He drove an elbow into Bishop's ribs. The giant grunted but barely flinched. Bishop swung back, his fist like a sledgehammer. Blake ducked just in time. The force smashed a hole into the marble wall. Blake gritted his teeth. This guy was a tank. Then, Bishop grabbed him. A bone-crushing grip around Blake's throat. The giant lifted him off the ground, grinning. "This the best you got, soldier boy?" Blake struggled, vision blurring. Then, a flash of silver. A blade. In one swift motion, Blake drove his combat knife into Bishop's forearm. The giant roared, dropping him. Blake landed, rolled, and sprang up. A brutal kick to Bishop's knee. A punch to the throat. A final, skull-rattling elbow to the temple. The giant staggered, and then he fell, out cold. Blake turned to Graves. The businessman was backing away, shaking his head. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed. "The syndicate is bigger than me. Bigger than you." Blake raised his gun. "And yet here you are, all alone." Graves swallowed hard. Then he bolted. Blake pursued, weaving through the burning corridors of the mansion. Graves reached a hidden exit, yanking open a reinforced steel door, only to freeze. Standing there, waiting for him, Carter. Gun raised. "Badge out." "Malcolm Graves. You're under arrest." Graves growled, raising his hands. It was over. The next day, Blake stood at the airport, watching the sunrise. Carter stood beside him. "So, what now?" Blake exhaled. "I go home." She smirked. "Until the next time you accidentally get into troubles?" Blake grinned. "You know me too well." As he turned toward his gate, Carter called after him. Hey, Blake. He stopped. You did good today. Blake smiled. Then, without another word, he walked away.